it's not going to be perfect and that it is a roller coaster. I think sometimes women are afraid to take a jump or leap to something new until everything seems like it's figured out and you have all your T's crossed and your I's dotted and you're ready to make that jump. And I don't think that's probably realistic for most people. I think sometimes you have to trust your gut and do all the things that you can control to make an educated guess decision of what to do next. Can we do it?
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Influential Women, where we empower, connect, and inspire women who are leading, creating, and redefining what is possible. I'm your host, Jodie O'Brien. Today, we are joined by Betsy Hamm, former CEO of Duck Donuts and founder of a new women in leadership platform. For nearly a decade, Betsy led Duck Donuts from 20 locations to nearly 200 globally. She has scaled a beloved brand while maintaining its core mission of sprinkling happiness. She became known for her people-first approach to growth and her commitment to franchise success over speed. But in January of 2025, Betsy stepped away from that role and launched her very own company. She's now living what she calls the very real roller coaster of going from corporate leadership to solopreneur, navigating a career reset, building momentum, and trusting her next chapter. Today's conversation is about identity after you forgo a title, building a personal brand with intention, visibility as a strategy, the power of our circles, and what Betsy is learning about women in leadership that she only wishes many of us knew. Betsy, welcome. It's great to have you with us.
Thank you so much for having me.
We're so glad that you're here. So Duck Donuts, it's now one of the most recognizable names in its category, and many people wouldn't even know the brand the way they do today if it weren't for you and your leadership. You scaled it from 20 to nearly 200 locations globally. So take us on that journey. What were the defining decisions that fueled that growth, and what kind of leadership did it actually require to build something at that level?
Yeah, it's crazy when I think back. If somebody would have told me years ago I'd be the CEO of an international donut franchise, I would think they were crazy. Like that didn't really sound like that would be my path. And it's funny how things happen. Duck Donuts had opened their corporate headquarters in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, which is near where I live, and it was founder led at the time. I had never heard of the brand, and someone said, "Hey, they just want someone to come in and build out their marketing team and build the brand." And people who went to the Outer Banks, which is where Duck started, knew the brand and loved it, but they wanted to make it a really even regional household name at the beginning. So when I met with the founder, who was the CEO at the time, he painted this vision. I thought, this is a marketing person's dream come true, to be able to take these pieces and sophisticate it and to build this brand. So that was in 2016, and I was employee number 12, and it was mostly friends and family at the time, and had the opportunity to go in and really work side by side with the founder, which was a very big culture shock, I think, for all of us. I had come from a very large organization, lots of layers, lots of people, lots of departments, now to this startup. It was, very small team. And it didn't take long of being there, realizing, okay, this is something special, right? The cult following that the brand was creating once they were even outside of where they originated in the Outer Banks, you could see this positive momentum. So during that time, I continued to take on additional responsibility outside of marketing to, hey, like, what's our strategy and our structure? And we're going to have to keep building out the team. And it was this amazing ride of building all of that from, I wouldn't say from scratch. The brand existed. There was 12 locations when I started, or 20 locations when I started. But, it was putting all those pieces together. And the hard part when you're in growth mode is that there's so many things that are on fire and are an emergency today. Right now, everybody needs something, but you're trying to be future focused and strategic and set goals, but you don't even know what you're setting goals against because no one's ever been here. No one's been growing this fast. So from a leadership perspective, I don't even know how many lessons I learned along the way about the importance of creating culture and building a team and holding people accountable. And for something that had started as this mom and pop run organization, is, suddenly we had to make this a sophisticated, sustainable structure because people were investing, their life savings into a Duck Donut. So there was so many cool opportunities and lessons learned. And I would always say to the team, not many people get this opportunity to be part of building something nearly from scratch. I mean, we were kind of coming in at that ground level and being able to take that to something that was nationally recognized and even internationally recognized, was a pretty cool experience.
That's amazing. So, at Influential Women, we talk to women about running companies, but leading a franchise system is fundamentally different. You were accountable not only for brand growth, but for entrepreneurs who had put their capital, their credibility, their whole lives, their families on the line. So, how did you build a culture of trust when so many people's futures depended on your decisions?
Yeah, it's very tough, and especially in the beginning when we didn't have it all figured out. So, we were trying to create playbooks and operations cadence and, what was required and consistency. And that's what I don't think a lot of people realize with the franchise model is here we were at corporate headquarters, our team was here, and our job was to give the franchisees the tools and the resources to succeed. So you need their feedback, you need their expertise, but you need consistency. So when you go to, a Duck Donuts, just like how you go to a McDonald's or Chipotle, pick your brand, you want that same experience. You have to have the same experience, the same product, and it has to be like that no matter what state you're in. So creating those systems and that structure and consistency is hard, especially when it's from scratch. And as you're doing that and you're kind of fine tuning, okay, here's who we are, here's what we do, it doesn't make everybody happy. And to your point, yeah, franchisees are investing hundreds of thousands of dollars of life savings. This isn't just they bought a job, right? They bought a future, they bought this career. And trying to balance doing what was right for the brand and for the system at large versus one franchisee. So, full disclosure, it's not easy and it was not perfect. There was times, if sales were not where a franchisee wanted them to be, they go in panic mode and what's going on and what can I do and what are you doing? Things. Franchising is this very interesting relationship where you rely on each other. They bought into a system because it's tried and true and they don't have to figure everything out. But at the end of the day, they're responsible for executing on their business. So it's this very interesting dynamic across any franchise organization of, okay, here's your tools, here's your resources, we're here to support you, but at the end of the day, you have to run the business. It was really important to make sure that we got the right franchisee from the beginning that aligned with, hey, this is hard work. This is a restaurant, right? This isn't a passive investment where you just pay your franchise fee and open the doors and people are just magically going to come. You have to worry about customers. You have to worry about, your 16-year-old employees, all of those things that are very different to most franchisees who come from various backgrounds, from accountants to teachers to you name it. We had very different backgrounds of people who came into the system. So trying to give support to people who maybe never even saw a P&L in their past was interesting and challenging, but trying to do what was best for the brand at large was really what we kept in mind. And knowing how important this job was, this was very serious. You could be like, oh, you're just selling donuts. Well, the franchisees are selling donuts. Our job is to support them to help their business grow. So it's a very challenging, difficult essentially.
It's incredible. So, Betsy, one thing I haven't had a chance to share with you is that I actually worked some in franchise marketing, and these franchisees are some of the hardest working people, most dedicated, most passionate people that I have ever met. And so, you've talked about learning to translate your expertise into that clear message so that people actually, like them, understand and that they can say yes to and they can buy in. So that's a lot harder than it sounds, especially if you've spent years in corporate where that messaging is done for you. So, how do you communicate your message in a way that really resonates without it feeling salesy or inauthentic?
Yeah, that's a great question. When we started getting more strategic and more planful, we put together this amazing strategic plan and I was really proud of it. And then we presented it to the franchisees and they were like, what? What are we doing? So I realized we had to keep it simple and they're busy. They have a million things going on. They're in their shop, they're dealing with customers. So they don't have time to sit there and dissect something. So we were very intentional with our cadence of communication, everything from quarterly town halls to monthly CEO messages. And we kept it simple on the things that we knew were most important to them, which of course are increasing sales. What are we doing to increase sales? What are we doing to decrease cost? It honestly came down to those two big buckets. And then that was able to just be repeated and they understood how that was impacting them. So, it was definitely keeping it concise and clear and repeatable again and again and again, including those important pieces.
You're being intentional about visibility in a way that many leaders struggle with. Visibility can feel like uncomfortable or like you're bragging. I hate that, by the way. It's so painful, right? But you're treating it as a strategy. And I guess my question is, why is it so important for women to become comfortable being seen? Because it's very awkward. It's
Right.
very, what's that word? Ick. It feels ick, right?
Visibility is so important. And, one of the key things that I always stress to women is the importance of exposure, which is sort of the same thing, and getting out there and making those connections. People have to know who you are and what you're doing, whether you are a coordinator or you are a CEO. And it just comes down to that career focus where, there's no such thing as job security anymore, but there's career security. Creating this network and having people know who you are, what you do, what's the value that you can bring. And it doesn't mean because you're looking for a new job next month, but it may mean maybe you are, or maybe you're looking for new clients. So having that exposure and that visibility is really important. And I get it. It does feel sometimes ick, or I don't want to put myself out there, but you just have to start doing things that you feel comfortable doing and then grow it. So maybe it's posting on LinkedIn. Maybe you start off with once a month about a project that you're working on or something that's going on. And maybe you start reaching out to people who are in your industry that are doing something similar, or maybe it's a company you want to work at. So it's just finding what you feel slightly more comfortable with. And then just kind of as you get comfortable, I think growing, I think back to, especially when I first became CEO, my visibility went through the roof, right? I just kind of was moseying along doing my thing. And then, oh, it's a woman CEO. Of course, the restaurant franchising industry is very heavy male, very over 60, let's just say. So, oh, here's I'll go younger, a younger female, coming into this role. And so the exposure was massive. And at first, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is so uncomfortable. It's not about me, it's about Duck. But then I realized I was the vehicle to get the exposure for the company too. And so it does take some getting used to of putting yourself out there. But I think if you can do it in a way where you start to build that and feel a little bit more comfortable, then you can continue to grow it, because I think the visibility and exposure is critical to your success, no matter what your role is.
And there's so much power in leaders putting themselves out there, especially on LinkedIn. Like
Yes.
there is power in that. So you talk about surrounding yourself though with the right people, which we know is like the secret sauce. You need cheerleaders, you need truth tellers, because letting go of that, if you don't have those right connectors and those people in your life, those bad relationships can really drain you. So it's such a practical insight. But how do you identify which relationships are serving you and which ones really aren't, and actually let go of people, especially if there's a history of that obligation?
That's such an important point too about letting go. So I think, we talk about the exposure, the visibility, the network. That's kind of like the top layer. And then you get into more of who that community is and just people that you typically surround yourself with. But then there's your circle. And those are the people that you're closest to, that you can pick up the phone and call or send a text, or, hey, I have an idea. I just want to bounce this off of you. And they're your cheerleaders. They can be your truth tellers. The people play different roles. And the reality is your circle can change during your life. And maybe it's because of the company you work for or the position you're in. But I think what I realized most in the year after leaving Duck is there's a lot of relationships that are purely transactional. So you think maybe that somebody is, I don't want to say a friend, it's not somebody you're hanging out with on the weekend, but you think you have a real relationship, a real connection. I love relationships. I love people. So, you think you have these relationships with people, and then your role changes and you never hear from them again. And you're thinking, what just happened? I mean, we didn't have a real relationship. This was purely transactional because I had, whether it was influence or, something along those lines, I had something that benefited them. So that was really in the last year. I took a hard look of, okay, hold on. I have this massive network, tons of people on LinkedIn that half of them I don't even know. But who am I really surrounding myself with that I can rely on? And who are those people who, were even proactively reaching out to me? Hey, what's going on? How can I help? Who can I connect you with? What are you doing that I could call and say, hey, I want to bounce this idea off of you. I want to start this, women in leadership platform, whatever it was. You start to realize who's really there for you. And I think a lot of times the ones that you don't need are the ones that drain you, or maybe just a one-way relationship where you're constantly doing something for them and they're not able to return that. I think you do have to let those die off essentially, which sometimes depending on the situation is easier than others. I think there were some relationships during my transition where I was like, okay, we're done here. And you just kind of don't proactively reach
Right.
out, or yeah, you're not putting any time or effort into that. And then you just focus on the ones that, you do have a two-way relationship with and who can support you. And you can support them, right? This isn't a one-way relationship or
Yeah.
support. You have to be able to be there for them too. But that probably was my biggest lesson in the last year, is how critical that circle is.
Crazy. Just this week I had an old colleague reach out and like just congratulate me and puff me up and give me that encouragement. And I thought that's so nice. Like I was really appreciative of that. But now you're really making me think, right? We got to think back to all of the career, job decisions, things that we've been through. Life moves quickly. There's probably one person in each one of those roles that I think, man, I need to reach out to her. I need to encourage her. I miss her. That wasn't just a transactional relationship. So that challenges me. And I'm sure it challenges people in our audience to really think like, if you didn't feel like you wanted that to just be transactional, there's a moment that you can make that right. You can reach out on LinkedIn or through socials and really encourage them, let them know that you're thinking about them. I love
Yeah, and I love that you reinforce that because it's so true, and everyone's so busy. Everybody has a million
that.
things going on, but, if you do see something, say something, and it's funny, one of my best groups is women that I worked with at Hershey, I mean, 10, 15 years ago at this point, and there's a text group that every once in a while they'll be like, "Oh my gosh, Kara, I saw this, blah, blah, blah," and then everybody, piles on, so it's
Yes.
just that little reinforcement of, "Hey, great news, congrats." We try to get together, quarterly, and sometimes it happens, sometimes it doesn't, but
Yeah.
those relationships take work, and I think sometimes we just get so wrapped up in the day-to-day, personally and professionally, that you do need to take a step back and be like, "Okay, who do I need to reconnect with?" And maybe it's a virtual coffee chat, maybe it's in person, but I think taking time to have those little catch-ups are really important.
Yeah. The latest one for me was a college friend too, which was trippy. Yeah, that was really good. And she's got her own thing going in Houston, and it was great to connect with her. You know, I- One thing I'm trying to understand here is you stepped away from Hershey's, which is yummy, and then now you've stepped away from Duck Donuts, which is even more yummy. You built a reputation as a leader there who cares about people. I'm sure everywhere you've worked, you've done that. And in January, you stepped away last January, which is significant. I mean, that's a huge move, especially when it's a time where it was thriving the business. So, walk us through that decision. Like, what made you know that it was time to do that?
Yeah, it is wild, and I can't believe it's been a year, and it's funny because when I left Hershey, I got the same, "Oh my gosh, what are you doing?" Where are you going? Because most people had
Yum.
never heard of Duck
Yeah.
Donuts, so they're thinking, "Why are you leaving Hershey?" And I'm like, "It seems like I should," right? I didn't have it was a gut feeling. I was super excited about it, and, at Duck, it was an amazing 8-year run. I learned so much. I had the opportunity to work for a founder for so long and then to be in that CEO role for 4 years. I learned so much, and it just was time, and, and complete transparency, working for private equity is totally different than working for founder-led companies, and that was the case the last 4 years. So, it brings a different set of challenges, and the strategy is very different, and at some point you're just like, "Okay, is this filling me or draining me, and how can I best add value and make an impact in an organization?" So, definitely, was a challenging time, but I'm confident then and even now that it was the right time. While we had accomplished so much, it was definitely time to move on.
So, tell me about that. You left behind a title. That's a pretty big title. And a lot of women watching our podcast have built our identities around a role. I mean, I've been through it too. So, when it's gone, you do ask yourself, like, who am I? It can be terrifying. It can be liberating. Can you talk about how to figure out, like, who are you when you're not defined by that corporate title anymore? Such a hard
It
transition,
is so hard, and you know what's hilarious is I always say I never cared about title. Some people get very
right?
fixated. I need to be a director, I need to be a VP, and I was always like, "I'm just gonna do my job, whatever." When I started at Duck the first year or 2, we didn't even have titles, right? And I was like, "I don't care, I'm the marketing person." Like, it didn't matter. So I thought I didn't care, but, with the title and with a cool concept like that, there was clout, there was status with that, and even with my kids, right? Like their friends thought I was cool because I was the CEO of a brand that they loved. So when that went away, I was like, crap, like I'm like, who am I? What am I doing? And while I had my own brand, I thought I was important and people cared about me because I was the CEO of an organization. So that was a little bit of a shock, and then again kind of going back to like you find out who really mattered and what mattered. And part of it too is I would have so many women in the restaurant industry who would reach out to me or that I meet at conferences and be like, "Oh my gosh, I'm so proud of you. It's so cool. You're such a role model that you are in this position as a woman." And so I felt like I was letting people down, I think was part of it. here I am at this role and now I'm not in it. And, these women are looking up to me being like, "Oh, you were in this role and now you're not." So, I don't know, part of it was probably self-inflicted. I'm sure there was a little bit of it out there. It did take me a moment to kind of reset and think, "Okay, well, people do care about me, and I do have a brand that I had created," I don't even think intentionally, I think organically, because of the position. So now I just need to move forward and figure out, what's next and take the status essentially or the clout that I had because of that, and then use it to my advantage to grow, like to grow my company, to grow my personal brand. And, I can still say I'm the former CEO, that's more of what catches people's attention versus, what I'm currently doing because it's still small, it's still new, but, it does definitely have that sort of sting in the beginning of, "Crap, I kinda like that title."
Yeah, it's so strange, but it defines us in so many ways. And then when it doesn't, it is a confusing concept. So you call this transition like a very real roller coaster. Not everyone uses that kind of honesty, but a lot of women in your position would tell a more maybe polished story. We appreciate you being transparent, but you're naming that actual experience. So, what does that roller coaster look like for you right now? And how do you stay grounded when things feel so uncertain?
Yeah, and especially, all my years at Hershey, roller coasters were my jam for many years, and I can picture the one that went upside down with barrel rolls and maybe even went backwards. I don't know. I mean, it's been like, a very intense roller coaster ride, and it's funny because going back over the last 12 months, in the beginning, it was like, "Oh, crap. What am I doing? Where am I going? How am I gonna handle this?" And of course, people are reaching out with, "Hey, do you wanna work here? Do you wanna do this?" And I slowly was figuring out what I didn't wanna do, like, I didn't wanna relocate because I have kids in high school, so that ruled out a whole slew of opportunities, and then I was like, "Well, I loved helping emerging brands." So I went through this almost like brand strategy process with
Mhm.
myself of, "Who am I? What am I trying to do? Who's my target audience? Who can I help?" And kinda started building it, and there was times where I was so excited and I could feel this positive momentum, and then there's other times where I'm like, "I think I'm gonna start making bread. I don't know what to do with my time."
Yes.
So, it was just kind of figuring out how I was going to grow, and, I launched the podcast and the women in leadership stuff, which has been great, but that's very slow and not monetized essentially. So, it's just sort of this, like, churn of, "Okay, how am I spending my time? Who am I focused on? What am I doing?" I am not a salesperson. I learned all the things that I'm not good at, and coming from whether it was Hershey or Duck, I've always worked with a team. So, suddenly I'm, like, sitting in my basement office by myself, and I'm like, "What?" After all the coffee chats and all the check-ins, the first couple months came to an end. So there's been moments of pure panic, honestly. And because at some point, not some point now, I need financial stability essentially. So while I was kind of throwing a lot of spaghetti at the wall in the beginning, halfway through the year, I'm like, all right, we need to figure out what's actually sticking here and focus on that. So, and it's funny because I'm pretty active on LinkedIn and I've had people say to me throughout the year and even recently, like, "Oh my gosh, congrats. You look like you're killing it. Like I see your posts, like I'm so glad everything is amazing." And I'm like, "What?"
Is it? Is it amazing?
I'm like, "I'm sorry if I portrayed that this has been amazing." Well, it's, been the ups and downs, but,
Yeah,
it's just funny that, yeah, you don't wanna put out all the dirty laundry essentially, but yeah, there's been
right.
moments of like, "Oh my god, am I doing the right thing? Like, should I just go back and get a corporate job and just have that
Yes.
stability?" Which I'm not gonna do.
Oh my gosh. Amen. Amen to so many of these things that you said. So obviously you're seeing patterns, right? And especially like I'm sure you see patterns within yourself and now you're pointing out patterns in my life and I'm sure others where we struggle, right, with confidence and credibility, visibility, the dynamics with other women. So why do you think that we're still facing these challenges? I mean, you're in this women in leadership platform program, like this development stage. Why do you think we're still struggling so much?
I don't know. It's crazy because you would think that we've made so much progress and that we should be in a better place. And I think so much of our struggles are self-inflicted. I think it's to your point, it's the struggling with the confidence. It's disheartening how many adult women struggle with confidence. I think we think about confidence I have high school teenagers, as I mentioned, about teenagers and, not having confidence and they need to grow it. And I think women feel that, oh, if I get to a certain age or I get a certain title, that I'm suddenly going to have confidence and everything is going to be perfect and sunshine and roses. And the reality is age doesn't matter, title doesn't matter. even your prior achievements don't matter. Look at the Olympics, right? Perfect timing of just on the heels of the Olympics. Here's these elite athletes who've won gold or are the best in their country, and confidence still is an issue for them, at that when they're competing at that level to the point that it impacts their performance. So I think the confidence piece is really tough, and I don't think there's a quick solve. I think it's just being intentional on building your confidence. Everyone talks about it being a muscle, which I think is so true. And I think we're also overloaded with what we're spending time on personally, professionally, that we don't take time to focus on ourselves and be intentional about how are we building confidence, how are we building our personal brand, how are we getting that exposure and that visibility, all of those key elements that help you be successful and want you to continue to grow. So I think a lot of the struggles we find are not because of the boys club, like that exists. Great, good for them. I always say I wish we had a girls community, maybe not a girls club. That's not inclusive, but I think it's just the lack of confidence we have in ourselves. And then I think a lot of times women aren't great at supporting each other. So if we could be focused on taking care of ourselves and doing what's right for us, but then also supporting the women around us, I think we would all be in a better position.
Okay, so how can we support you? Tell me about this platform.
Yeah, so I launched a podcast last March. It was called Loud and Lifted, and it's all about women in leadership and how we need to flip the script, right? Kind of going back to that intentional support for ourselves and for each other. And it's been great. Everybody actually had an Olympic athlete on, from CEOs, entrepreneurs. And it's so funny because during the last year, the same themes keep coming up no matter what the topic was, right? You always, of course, have a different topic, different guests, but it always goes back to confidence. It goes back to building your personal brand. It goes back to the exposure and the community support piece of it, especially for these women personally, like in their home lives as well. So, I love those buckets and themes. So I've been working on taking that and then how do you make that into content for workshops or visual or virtual workshops or in-person workshops. And a lot of it's just having the conversation and the connection. I started doing, I call them sip and lifts locally where I live with just small business owners. There's no agenda. It's just to bring women together to connect over coffee. It's, 90 minutes on a Thursday. And I had the first one last or 2 weeks ago, and they were all like, this is, and I'm like, I don't know how this is going to go. I hope they show up. Right. And it was 10 women who showed up and like, hey, grab a coffee. Like, let's just sit down and chat. And they were very different backgrounds, very different businesses that they owned. But the connection immediately was, they're like, we feel so isolated, feel so alone if we have these ways to connect with women. So my job is my goal, I guess, with this is just to have the conversations, bring light to it, give people tools to maybe address some of those challenges, and then just connect each other and have that opportunity to be supportive of each other and know when you can go or where you can go when you need that extra cheerleader or truth teller in your life.
I love that. That's amazing. Well, obviously, at Influential Women, our mission is to empower other women. So we empower you today. We also want to connect women. We want to inspire women. That's what you're doing. You're literally doing that through your Women in Leadership platform and just by being so honest about where you are in your own transitions. For the women listening who might be thinking about a career pivot, questioning their next move, or wondering if they can succeed on their own, what would you tell them that you wish someone would have told you?
I think the biggest thing is that it's not going to be perfect and that it is a roller coaster. I think sometimes women are afraid to take a jump or leap to something new until everything seems like it's figured out and you have all your T's crossed and your I's dotted and you're ready to make that jump. And I don't think that's probably realistic for most people. I think sometimes you have to trust your gut and do all the things that you can control to make an educated guess decision of what to do next. But it's messy. At the end of the day, it's messy. Even if you think you're super prepared and buttoned up, I definitely didn't know how messy it would be essentially. But again, going back to that support to rely on the people around you. Like I said, this past year, I realized what an amazing support group I had. And some people I was like, okay, this is great. I didn't realize you were that we had this kind of relationship or how supportive you could be. Focusing on that and not being afraid to ask for help. I mean, I met with so many people like, tell me how you do this. What do you do? How do you do that? Like just asking questions of people who've been there and done that ahead of me has been huge. So no, it's going to be messy, but no, you also need to ask for support and help from those around you.
Well, that's so beautiful. Betsy, it has been such an honor to talk to you today. I mean, I know you can't bring us donuts, but we're cool. We're loving your transition.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing what reinvention means to you. If you've enjoyed this episode and you're listening, please subscribe. Leave us a review. Share with the women who inspire you. Every story shared, of course, strengthens the visibility of women everywhere. And that's exactly what this community is all about. So listen, until next time, I'm Jodie O'Brien, and you better keep showing up, keep growing, and keep leading courageously.
Can we do it?